On the night of December 10th, 2021, a single long-lived supercell, the Quad-State Supercell, initiated southwest of Little Rock, Arkansas, and tracked across northeastern Arkansas, the Missouri Boot Heel, and western Kentucky before dissipating in far northwest Kentucky around 2 a.m. Central Standard Time. Along the way, it produced multiple to strong violent tornadoes, including a devastating tornado that struck towns such as Monette, Arkansas, Haiti/Caruthersville, Missouri, and the infamous Mayfield, Dawson Springs, and Bremen, Kentucky tornadoes. I'm Gabriel Harbour, and you are listening to the Storm Chaser Coaching Podcast. I am, of course, joined by lead coach here at Storm Chaser Coaching, Trey Greenwood. How you doing today, man?
Doing well. This is going to be a good one to talk about. Everybody knows about this case, and there were some really interesting dynamics at play here, so this should be a good one to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a unique storm. And I just want to remind folks that this episode is derived from a video you put out on your Convective Chronicles YouTube channel where you go super in depth into the event. There are lots of visuals, so I'm going to put the link to that in the description. If people want to check that out after listening, I would highly encourage it. You'll definitely get the same information, but delivered in a different way, and it will do nothing but enhance the knowledge that you are going to take in here. So, all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the first question, Trey. Can you walk through how the broad, subtly forced trough and moving surface low helped this supercell stay tornadic for so long?
Yeah, this was really a confluence of ingredients that were just perfect for significant long-tracked tornadic supercells, starting with the subtle shortwave that you couldn't really see it. It wasn't one of these very deep digging troughs that you see in the springtime on the plains. This was a very subtle trough that was embedded within mostly just southwesterly flow in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. But when you have these more subtle troughs, that can lessen the overall forcing for ascent, the upward motion, and allow for your storm mode to remain quite discrete for longer. So you have much more isolated supercells for longer. Those isolated supercells are much more likely to produce significant long track tornadoes than, say, a squall line. Also, you had the surface low that developed out ahead within this broad southwesterly flow and ahead of the shortwave. The surface low was actually moving with the storms off to the east and northeast. So what that did is it allowed the warm sector, the area that we have for really robust, the most robust air mass available, that was actually moving with the storms. Sometimes you have a very narrow warm sector in place. You may have a surface load that's not moving that all, just maybe a couple county-wide area where your warm sector is. That was not the case here. We had a broad warm sector, and that warm sector, because of the surface low moving with time at a rapid pace, it was actually advecting or transporting that warm sector with the storm off to the east. So it basically had unlimited resources at its disposal to continue to produce significant tornadoes for quite some time. Very moist air and strong instability were the hallmarks of this setup, and that air mass was able to move with that storm for such a long time that it was not going to dissipate until something disrupted it, like storms firing around it, etc.
Now, if you listening at home or the gym or the office, the car, wherever you listen to podcasts, you want the same information that we use to actually create the script and the outline for this episode, there is a link in the description to get the podcast notes. It'll take you to a form. Just give us your email address real quick. We'll send you those via email, and you will be able to keep them forever, use them for reference if you want to work on something related to the storm in the future, or just read them for your own personal edification. Next question, Trey. What should forecasters look for in model trends like the low-level cyclone amplification and backing when assessing long-track tornado potential?
Yeah, so the geometry and the orientation of the surface low is really going to be important and something you're going to want to watch for on model trends, especially those winds in the warm sector out ahead of the surface low. Sometimes you can get situations where winds are a little bit more veered, which means a little bit more out of the southwest at the surface. That tends to decrease low-level shear. And in these cases that are kinematically driven, especially you'll see these cases in the Midwest, Mid-South, and Southeast, you really want some of that more backed low-level flow, more out of the south or southeast. And you want to watch that trend over time because models can be a little bit finicky with that. If you see a trend where the low-level cyclone maybe was a little bit more strung out, it wasn't really as robust as it might be otherwise, You may have some of those more veered winds in the warm sector, less low level shear, less chance for long track significant tornadoes. But if you see on the models that low level cyclone, that surface low is starting to really become a little bit more tight, moisture is wrapping a little bit harder into the surface low, you may see those surface winds back a little bit more out of the south or southeast, which increases low level shear and can give you a more favorable kinematic environment for long track tornadic supercells.
Now, from a chasing perspective, how should we adjust our strategy on nights when warm advection is actually improving the environment after dark?
In these cases, and cases like, say, a Greensburg from 2007, that EF5 case, those are cases where the cooling at the surface typically tends to happen after dark. So you lose daytime heating from the sun, and the air very near the surface cools faster than the air just above it, which allows a capping inversion to build back in. That's why storms tend to either go elevated after dark or they will lose some of their steam after dark. And typically, significant tornado production can decrease after dark as well because of this. That was not the case in a scenario like Greensburg or a quad-state supercell case. You had warm advection that was very strong because you had a strong surface low that was developing and deepening with time. Those winds out in the warm sector out ahead of it were out of the south and strengthening, really, and a low-level jet was strengthening as well. Those winds about a kilometer off the surface, those were strengthening pretty significantly out of the south to pump that moisture really efficiently out from the south into our area of interest. And that kind of helps overcome some of that capping inversion that can build back in after dark. In these cases, you really need to watch for low-level thermodynamics after dark. If they don't really lessen in their intensity at all, you don't see that capping inversion building back in, that is a sign that you know that warm advection may be taking over here and maybe actually allowing the storms to remain surface based, remain very intense after dark. With that low level jet ramp up, low level shear can ramp up as well. And so that can be a classic combination for significant long track tornado production to actually increase after dark. So those cases really need to be monitored, not just during the day, but after dark as well for those reasons.
Yeah, chasing at night always something that is tenuous at best. So great advice if people are actually deciding to take the challenge and go after those storms.
Yeah, absolutely. Nighttime chasing is difficult as is, and in these cases where you have that deepening surface low that continues to do so after dark, those can be some of your hallmark cases for those long-lived violent tornadoes even after the sun goes down.
If you've made it this far into the podcast, you are 100% the type of person who would benefit from being a part of our Discord community. There are like-minded storm chasers talking about everything from gear that they put in their vehicles to the forecasts for upcoming events to asking our coaches questions in the coach Q&A chat. Link to that is in the description, along with a couple of ebooks that you can check out. They are absolutely free. They're packed with information. Trey made them himself, so you know that they were baked with love. That's the right way to say it, Trey.
Absolutely.
Link in description, guys. Definitely check those out. Next question, Trey. What are the key radar cues like the 3-body scatter spike, which was incredible to see, from the debris field near Mayfield? Does that tell you that a tornado is truly in a catastrophic phase?
Yeah, that was a very rare sight. So, just for some context here, a 3-body scatter spike is something that you'll usually see with a significant hail storm or a hail producing supercell. The radar beam bounces off the large hail in the storm. It gets deflected down by that large hail toward the ground, then back up into the storm, then back to the radar. So it is deflected 3 times, hence the name 3-body scatter spike. Now, again, that's usually reserved for hailstorms. Very rarely we can see 3-body scatter spikes emanating from the debris ball at the tip of the hook echo in tornadic supercells. The Mayfield case was one of the more incredible examples of this. And again, you don't see this often at all, but that just means there's so much debris being lofted by the tornado into the atmosphere that the radar beam is bouncing off the debris and getting deflected. So that shows you that the tornado is very strong. Other signatures include the lofting of debris high into the atmosphere. So if you look at your correlation coefficient product, you'll see that correlation coefficient minimum in coincident with the tornado vortex signature in velocity data, but that will extend way up into the storm. That tells you that tornado is very strong, lofting that debris all the way up. It takes a strong tornado to do that. up to 10, 20, 30 plus thousand feet. That is a very strong tornado. And of course, with a debris signature and correlation coefficient, we know that a tornado is in progress and doing damage. And of course, your velocity signature. You can take a look and see how strong the winds are within that. That'll show you how strong the tornado may be. But yes, the three-body scatter spike is certainly a hallmark of some of these truly catastrophic tornadoes that are doing some pretty significant damage.
I'm going to sneak a little off-script question in here, Trey. I know you talked about the radar velocity data, and I've heard you talk before about different products that can show that data. Is there a difference between, let's say, the velocity, just the regular one, and the storm relative velocity, and which one should people be using for the best look at what's going on?
Velocity, you're just looking at basically how hard's the wind blowing, how fast is the wind blowing mode. That's how I kind of like to describe it. You have reflectivity, how hard it's raining mode. Velocity, how fast is the wind blowing mode. Basically, it's just tracking the speed of those targets that the radar is bouncing off of. With storm relative velocity, the storm motion is factored out. So in some cases, you may see you might not, in a tornadic supercell case with maybe a weaker vortex signature, weaker velocity couplet. If you're just looking at standard velocity, you may not see much going on at all because the storm motion may actually be factored into that calculation and be masking some of the stronger winds within the couplet. If you go to storm relative velocity, that storm motion is factored out, and you may see a more robust couplet that may be closer to reality. So when you're looking for tornadic signatures, tornado vortex signatures, velocity couplets for rotation, any rotational entity, you want to look at storm relative velocity. Standard velocity is good for looking for straight line winds, microbursts, damaging winds within an MCS, etc. The standard velocity is best for that. But when you're looking for tornadic activity, storm relative velocity is the one you want to use.
Really appreciate the clarification there because I know that's a question I myself have often, and so I'm sure a lot of people who are listening are going to be wondering that as well.
Yeah, anytime you see storm relative, it always means the storm motion is factored out. So storm relative velocity, storm relative helicity, it's the spin of the storm with the storm motion factored out. So that is always going to be better for rotational signatures like tornadoes. So the storm relative velocity, usually I just keep it on storm relative velocity when I'm chasing any type of severe weather, but that's the main difference between those two.
How do you differentiate between a storm that's going through a classic occlusion cycle versus a brief disruption like the one near Sandburg, where the Quad-State Supercell likely lifted and then re-tornadogenesis, if that's a word, occurred near the Kentucky-Tennessee line?
So when you have an occlusion going on, the rear flank downdraft wraps completely around the tornadic circulation, cutting it off from the warm, moist inflow that it needs to survive, and that induces dissipation usually. When you see that happening, usually what happens is the ongoing tornado and mesocyclone occlude and move off to the left or north of their previous track, while a new mesocyclone takes its place, basically. So you'll see the hook echo of the storm and the velocity couplet with the ongoing tornado move off to the north or left, and then you'll see a new hook echo or appendage develop where the old one was. With the Quad-State Supercell and kind of almost a failed occlusion process, you won't really see that happen. You'll see the hook echo maybe stay pretty solid, not really move a whole lot to the north of where it was. It might stay in the same spot, but you may lose the strong velocity couplet that you saw with the ongoing tornado. It may just be a brief disruption, but you usually will see that cycle happen real quick after that happens. It may start to bow out a little bit, what we call a dog leg type appearance. So instead of the hook echo kind of bowing inward toward the storm, it starts to bow outward a little bit. That may mean that you have a little bit of outflow, a little bit of a strong rear flank downdraft surge that may cause a little bit of an imbalance between the inflow and outflow momentarily. But then you'll start to see that hook echo wrap back into the storm, at which time tornado rotation increases and tornadogenesis can happen again. So that's kind of the hallmark there. An environment like the Quad-State Supercell, that was favorable for more long track supercells, not so much your occlusion, your cyclic occluding mesocyclones and tornadoes. Typical plains case might be.
Remember to check out those links in the description below and then watch another video.